Envision this. September 1998, deep in the heart of Arkansas. A young mother, Jennifer Williams, a mere 22 years old, dissolves into the ether on a Thursday night. With her is her 22-month-old daughter, Emily, and a second baby girl, a whisper of life 7 months in her womb. They were on a pilgrimage to the hospital, poised to welcome a new soul, and then silence, an utter void, erased from the world as if they were never there. But here is where the tale twists into something truly staggering. For 23 agonizing years, her family waged a war against despair, a campaign of prayer, flyers, and vigils, enduring every shade of torment imaginable. The authorities scrutinized everyone, leaving no stone unturned. Yet the truth, the chilling, absolute truth, lay submerged in watery darkness, a secret biding its time, waiting to breach the surface in the most astonishing way conceivable. This is a saga of enduring hope, of profound heartbreak, and of a revelation that would finally guide 3 lost souls home from a 2-decade-long abyss of mystery. Now, before we plunge into the depths of this case, I need you to drop a 1 in the comments if this genre of true crime truly speaks to you. Your voice, your engagement, it's the compass that guides me to the stories that need to be told. And for those of you just finding this channel, strike that subscribe button, because we are unearthing the cold cases that were finally cracked, the enigmas that stole sleep from families for generations, and the breathtaking moments when the truth finally clawed its way into the light. Tell me, from what state are you bearing witness to this story tonight? I thrive on knowing where this narrative is reaching. All right, let's descend into this chronicle, for it is heavy, it is raw, and it will etch itself upon your memory. September 11th, 1998, Little Rock, Arkansas. The very air was a suffocating blanket of late summer humidity, the kind that clings to your soul and weighs down the world. Jennifer Williams was carving out a life in a modest apartment with her toddler, Emily, fighting the current as so many young single mothers do. At 22, Jennifer had weathered storms most never face in a lifetime. Emily had arrived when she was just 20, a love story with the father that had frayed and unraveled. Such is the tapestry of life, is it not? A design rarely woven according to plan. But Jennifer was forged from resilience. She was a fighter, a spirit unwilling to be extinguished, the kind of woman who would bleed herself dry working 2 jobs to ensure there was food on the table. Her family remembers her as a beacon, a smile that could defy the darkest of days. The sound of her making Emily laugh was a symphony of pure joy that could fill any void. And now, 7 months into carrying another daughter, Jennifer was on the cusp of her small world expanding once more. The father of this unborn child was a man named Michael Stark. Their connection was a tangled web, as they so often are, but Michael had been a presence, lending a hand where he could. He had a son of his own from a life before, a teenager named David, who was occasionally part of the scenery. The entire affair was a messy mosaic of real life, one that refuses to be confined within neat, simple frames. Jennifer had been a transient guest in Michael's home, but a palpable tension had taken root. She had retreated to her own sanctuary in Little Rock for the preceding weeks, some 75 miles from Michael's world in Russellville. The baby was coming imminently. Her due date was a breath away on September 15th, a mere 4 days' time. Jennifer had orchestrated her plans to deliver at a hospital in Russellville, wanting to be tethered to Michael for the birth, the fractures in their relationship notwithstanding. Was it hope? Was it optimism? It was a belief that, for the sake of their child, they could mend what was broken. On that Thursday, September 11th, 1998, Jennifer began her ritual. She packed her blue 1992 Honda Accord with the artifacts of her life: tiny clothes for the baby, her own hospital bag, a collection of toys to quiet a restless toddler. The journey was supposed to be a simple verse: a drive from Little Rock to Russellville, a straight line down Highway 7, a journey of perhaps an hour and a half. Arrive, settle in, and await the arrival of her daughter. Simple, a straight, unbroken line. Jennifer's mother, Patricia, was there, helping her load the car that afternoon. A current of dread ran through her. What mother would not feel it? Her daughter, heavy with child, navigating the night with a toddler in tow. Why not wait for the morning light? Patricia pleaded, a mother's intuition shrieking a silent alarm. The roads will be clearer, your vision true. But Jennifer was a river, determined in her course. Mom, I am fine, she declared, that unyielding core of her spirit shining through. "It's not so far. I will call you the moment I am there, I promise." Those words, "I'll call you when I get there," would become a ghostly refrain, echoing in Patricia's mind for the next 23 years. For the promised call was a promise broken by silence. Jennifer departed Little Rock as night fell. Around 9 in the evening, the September darkness had already staked its claim, arriving earlier each day as summer bled into autumn. Emily was nestled in her car seat, her eyes likely heavy with sleep. The radio murmured a soft tune. The windows cracked, just enough to stir the air, a concession to the fickle air conditioning in that aging Honda. The drive itself should have been a familiar script. Highway 7 carving a path northwest, then a brief dance with Highway 64. These were arteries she had traveled before, veins of asphalt holding no surprise. The landscape was punctuated by small Arkansas towns, little constellations of life, where everyone's story is known, and the face of a stranger is a headline. Sometime around 11:30 that night, or perhaps closer to the witching hour, for memories blur in the dark, a witness saw her. A fleeting image of Jennifer at a gas station. She pulled in to quench the car's thirst, and no doubt to relieve the pressure of the baby on her bladder. The attendant recalled her, because a woman, profoundly pregnant and alone with a small child in the dead of night, is a portrait you do not forget. She filled the tank, paid with cash, and used the restroom. Emily was awake but a quiet shadow, weary and yearning for bed. Jennifer appeared as normal as the night, was long, perhaps tired, but untroubled. No hint of distress, no shadow of fear in her eyes. She climbed back into that blue Honda Accord, pulling away from the island of light at the gas station, and pointed her car northwest, into the waiting darkness. It was the last confirmed moment anyone on this earth would see Jennifer Williams and her daughter Emily alive. And then, a profound and deafening silence descended. They bled into the ink-black heart of the Arkansas night, as if they had driven straight through the veil of our reality. Friday morning, September 12th. Patricia awoke to a silent home, anticipating the call that would announce her daughter's safe passage. But the phone remained a silent monument. She tried Jennifer's cell, a direct path to the disembodied voice of a machine. She tried Michael's residence, a ringing that echoed into nothingness. Again and again, she dialed, the tendrils of worry tightening into a knot of pure dread with each unanswered plea. By noon, Patricia's world was fracturing. This was not her Jennifer. Through every storm and every disagreement, Jennifer always called her mother. Always. It was an unbreakable creed, especially with Emily by her side. Patricia's trembling hands dialed the Little Rock police, her voice a desperate attempt to report a tear in the fabric of her universe. "Ma'am, it has only been a few hours." A dispassionate voice on the line responded. "An adult has the right to their own path. Perhaps she stopped for the night, or her phone simply died." "You are not hearing me," Patricia insisted, her voice shattering. "My daughter is 7 months pregnant, with a toddler in her car. She would never, ever just not call. Something is terribly wrong." The officer dutifully recorded the information, but the urgency was absent. A report of a missing person, especially an adult, rarely ignites an immediate firestorm unless the specter of foul play is undeniable. And on paper, this was just a young woman who might have sought a moment of solitude, a woman whose car troubles would soon be resolved. But Patricia knew, a mother's soul is a compass that always points true north to her child. She began a frantic pilgrimage through her phone book, calling every name connected to her daughter. Friends, former colleagues, anyone who might hold a single thread of information. The answer was a chilling, unified chorus. Nothing. No one had laid eyes on or heard the voice of Jennifer since she had steered her car into the Little Rock night. It was as if she had driven off the very edge of existence. In Russellville, Michael Stark was adrift in a sea of confusion. He had anticipated Jennifer's arrival on Thursday night or Friday morning at the absolute latest. When the hours passed with no car in the driveway and no call, he reasoned that perhaps she'd had a change of heart, choosing to remain in Little Rock. But as the day bled away into another night of silence, a cold worry began to seep into his own heart. By Friday evening, with the void where Jennifer and Emily should have been growing wider, the police finally began to feel the gravity. A bolo beyond. The lookout was broadcast, a digital ghost of Jennifer's blue 1992 Honda Accord sent out across the state. Police in a multitude of counties were now alerted. The veins of asphalt she should have traveled were scoured, gas station attendants were interrogated, and every soul working along Highway 7 and Highway 64 was asked if they had seen a ghost. In the comments below, tell me what case you want me to unravel next. I delve into all manner of cold cases, vanishings, the kind of mysteries that haunt the waking world. Your suggestions are the fuel for this journey into the unknown. The community began to stir, a swift and powerful current. This was 1998, an era before the instant inferno of social media. But word still traveled, passed from hand to hand, from voice to voice. The faces of Jennifer and Emily, the stark description of that blue Honda Accord, they became a haunting tapestry on local news, in flyers that papered every shop window, on telephone poles that stood like silent sentinels throughout Arkansas. Patricia became a general, marshalling search parties. Armies of volunteers swept the highways and the lonely back roads, their eyes searching for any glint of metal, any scrap of a clue to what had befallen them. They walked the shadowed ditches, they pierced the wooded vales near the road, they questioned every business along the route, and they found nothing, not a single damned thing. The police began their interrogations, peeling back the layers of Jennifer's life. Friends, family, co-workers, acquaintances, each one a witness, and every voice told the same story. Jennifer was a devoted mother, her heart full with the anticipation of her new baby. There was no shadow in her soul that would lead her to self-harm or to willingly vanish. She had her battles, of course, but her gaze was fixed firmly on the horizon of the future. All eyes turned to Michael Stark. It is always the boyfriend, is it not? The first chapter in the Manual of Suspicion, especially when the relationship is a fractured one. The police questioned him with a relentless intensity. Where were you on that night? Can you prove it? Was there a fight? Was this about money, about custody, about any dark reason you might wish her gone from your world? Michael was a fortress of innocence. He swore he was home that night, a lonely vigil waiting for a car that never came. His teenage son, David, corroborated his story, a second voice swearing his father had been there all evening. But a seed of doubt had been planted in the minds of the investigators. Something about Michael's story felt dissonant. Perhaps it was the crushing weight of the situation, or perhaps it was something more. He remained a figure in the shadows of their investigation. Their gaze then shifted to Emily's biological father. Though he was a ghost in Emily's life, the police had to explore every dark corridor. What if a secret custody war had been raging unseen? What if he had emerged from the shadows to claim his daughter? But that narrative crumbled under scrutiny. He had an alibi, and in truth, he was barely a footnote in their story. It was a path that led nowhere. The days bled into weeks, September withered into the chill of October, and Jennifer's due date arrived as a hollow, silent ghost. The investigation clawed at walls of silence, a frantic search that found only the cold stone of dead ends. Police cast a desperate net through hospitals across Arkansas and neighboring states, chasing the phantom hope of an early labor, but found only emptiness. The Honda Accord, a vessel of steel and glass, had dissolved into the ether as completely as the souls it carried. But Patricia, a mother forged in the fires of hope, refused to surrender. She kept the apartment a sacred time capsule, a silent vigil against the encroaching void. The first year was a gauntlet of grief, with Emily's second birthday in November arriving not with cake, but with an unbearable emptiness, a void where a child should have been. The media's blazing spotlight soon flickered and died, for the world moves on to the next tragedy. But for a family, there is no moving on. They are prisoners of that single, shattering moment. 1999 bled into the year 2000, a new millennium that dawned on an old, cold sorrow. Jennifer Williams was still gone, and the case was frozen in the arctic silence of the unsolved. Patricia became a warrior of memory, her face a symbol of unwavering love on the evening news, lighting candles against the encroaching darkness of each September 11th. Whispers of theory swirled like phantom dust motes. Had she fled, or had a darker hand intervened? But shadows leave no evidence, and there was no body, no hallowed ground to mark a crime. That final, terrible vision of a solitary crash felt chillingly plausible. An image of Jennifer and Emily, lost and alone. A darkness no one dared to gaze into for long. For years, a dark cloud of suspicion clung to Michael Stark, a shadow he could never outrun, and his son David bore the weight of cruel schoolyard whispers that branded his father a killer. The years marched on in a relentless procession. 2001, 2002, 2003, each one a thief, stealing another sliver of the chance they were alive. The case file swelled not with answers, but with the ghosts of failed leads, a torturous cycle of hope and freefall that shattered the heart again and again. In 2005, a breakthrough seemed to tear through the veil. Remains found in Oklahoma, and for weeks, Patricia lived in the suspended animation of waiting, only to be hit by a tidal wave of relief and devastation. It was not Jennifer. The old guard of detectives retired, passing the torch to new eyes who walked the same haunted paths, only to arrive at the same desolate shore. Jennifer and Emily Williams had been swallowed by the world. If this story has seized you, strike that subscribe button, for we have not yet reached the heart of this labyrinth, and the revelation that waited for 23 years was a thunderbolt no one saw coming. By 2010, 12 years had passed. Emily would have been 13, and her sister, a life extinguished before its first breath, would have been nearly 12 ghosts the family tried to imagine, but the portraits were too painful to hold. The years of heartbreak carved new lines on Patricia's face, but the fire within her refused to be quenched. The September vigils burned on, a lone beacon in a world that had moved on. In the burgeoning digital age, the case found a spectral new life on internet forums, where armchair detectives debated in the glow of their screens, some as crusaders, others as vultures feasting on tragedy. By 2015, the science of solving the impossible had evolved, and the case was resurrected upon the altar of modern forensics, unleashing every weapon in the arsenal of technology. But science cannot conjure ghosts from thin air, without a body, without the car. Technology was a god with no power, and the riddle remained infuriatingly, insolubly whole. 2018 marked 20 years, 2 full decades spent wandering a wilderness of unanswered questions. A milestone Patricia hoped might finally shake a secret loose from the silence. A few whispers answered her call, but they were the familiar, hollow echoes of false hope, phantom sightings, and a grifter's greedy lies. The same cruel mirage. The family's collective hope began to crumble, and whispers of a memorial surfaced a desire for an ending, even one written without truth. But Patricia's hope was a fortress that would not fall. "There will be no funeral without my daughter and granddaughter," she declared, her words forged in iron. "They are out there, and I will find them. I don't care how long it takes." As a global pandemic convulsed the world, one small, fierce flame refused to be extinguished. Not even a plague could quarantine a mother's love or halt her sacred quest. By late 2021, 23 years had passed, and Patricia, now in her 70s, felt their weight in her bones. How can one find peace in a shattered world? And then, in the dying days of December 2021, the universe finally answered with an impossible twist of fate, a discovery that would, at long last, bring Jennifer and Emily home. There exists a band of modern-day knights, armed not with swords, but with sonar. They call themselves Adventures with Purpose, a volunteer crusade that plumbs the dark, watery depths for the lost. In the biting chill of early December 2021, a dedicated dive team haunted the waters of Arkansas, their quest a solemn vow to solve the riddles of the missing. Their focus fell upon the Illinois River, a dark ribbon winding through the state's northwestern heart, a river not vast, but deep and secretive. Its murky depths, a perfect tomb for a car, should the moment be right. Their sonar pulsed a mechanical heartbeat into the abyss, a methodical scan of the riverbed they'd performed hundreds of times across dozens of desolate locations, usually met with silence. But on December 4th, 2021, the silence was shattered. A ghost materialized on their screen, a large, car-sized specter resting on the floor of the Illinois River, near the shadow of Highway 71 in northern Arkansas. "We have a hit." A diver's voice cut through the tension, his eyes fixed on the sonar's cryptic glow. It could be a wreck, or just river trash. There's only one way to find out. The December water was a frigid hell, the visibility a blinding shroud. Yet these were professionals, born for this very moment. They plunged into the depths, a descent of maybe 25 to 30 feet. A modest depth, yet profound enough to entomb a car, rendering it invisible from the world above for more than 2 decades. As the diver touched the riverbed, his light sliced through the gloom, and his heart hammered against his ribs. It was a vehicle, no doubt. Not just any machine, but a blue Honda Accord, veiled in silt and algae, a ghost from the early 90s, sleeping in a watery grave. With deliberate hands, the diver swept away the river's embrace from the license plate. He scraped through layers of mud and time's tenacious growth until, finally, the numbers emerged from the murk. In that instant, an icy dread seized him, and he shot toward the surface, breaking the water like a man escaping a ghost. "Get the authorities," he gasped, the words tumbling out. Now, I believe we've just found Jennifer Williams. Drop a 2 in the comments if that revelation stunned you. Imagine it, 23 years swallowed by the river, a river scoured in the past. The implications were a tidal wave, the emotions, a storm. For more than 2 decades, the truth had been sleeping just beneath the surface. The response was a flash flood of flashing lights. Department after department converged on the scene. This was colossal, destined for national headlines. The divers marked the watery tomb, ceding control to the authorities. A 23-year-old cold case had just burst into flames. The recovery began at once, a delicate and somber ballet. This was no mere salvage. It was the exhumation of a crime scene, of evidence perfectly preserved in a liquid time capsule for over 2 decades. Every angle, every detail had to be documented, photographed, and handled with the reverence of an archaeological dig. Specialized equipment arrived: underwater cameras, forensic experts, a legion of the skilled. For hours, they worked. Slowly, meticulously, they tethered the Honda Accord, beginning its final ascent. The car rose like a leviathan, heavy with water and river muck, weeping its dark secrets from every seam as it breached the surface. Once the vehicle was finally rested onto the shore, a profound, chilling silence fell. Even the most stoic officers and seasoned recovery specialists paused, their breath caught in their throats, for inside that blue Honda Accord lay the silent testament of 3 human souls, reduced to bone. One soul in the driver's seat, Jennifer Williams, forever frozen in the moment her world plunged into darkness 23 years ago. Another in the back, embraced by the remnants of a child's car seat, little Emily, only 22 months old. And in the passenger seat, the most fragile of fragments, the tiny bones of an unborn child who would never know the Sunday. The car's final resting place on the riverbed told a silent story, a straight, unwavering path off the road. No signs of violence marred the vehicle's interior, no evidence of a struggle. The scene whispered not of malice, but of a heartbreaking, tragic accident. Highway 71, at that very spot, is a treacherous beast. A sharp, unannounced curve lies in wait, a trap for the unfamiliar, especially under the cloak of night. Back in 1998, the road offered no warnings, no guardrails, no signs. In the pitch black, with only faint light to guide you, that curve was an invisible predator. The investigators painted a haunting picture. Jennifer, weary from the road, 7 months pregnant, and burdened with discomfort, navigating an unknown darkness. She neared that fatal curve on Highway 71, blind to its severity. A moment of distraction, a touch too much speed, the car failed to follow the bend. It continued its linear path, off the asphalt, and into the waiting arms of the Illinois River. The transition would have been mercilessly swift. One breath, on the road, the next, a violent plunge into liquid night. The cabin would have flooded in an instant. The only mercy in this epic tragedy is that their suffering was likely brief. The shock, the frigid water, the sudden dark consciousness would have fled in moments. And so it rested for 23 years. Hundreds of cars crossed that bridge daily. Thousands of lives passed by that exact spot, utterly oblivious. No one knew that just feet below, a blue Honda Accord cradled 3 souls and the key to a mystery that had tormented a family for over 2 decades. In a cruel twist of fate, police had scoured this very area back in 1998. But river searches are a battle against the elements. The water was a silty veil. The technology of the era was primitive. Perhaps the search wasn't deep enough in this one specific place. It's a tragedy of circumstance, not of fault. But the thought is agonizing. The answer was always there, so close, yet just beyond their reach. Science offered the final, grim confirmation. The remains belonged to Jennifer Williams, her daughter Emily, and the little girl she never got to name. After 23 years of agonizing questions, the family was given an answer. It was not the miracle they had prayed for, the fantasy of a new life, of amnesia, but it was an end to the torment of the unknown. On December 5th, 2021, Patricia received the call she had both prayed for and dreaded for years. Every ring from the police had been a spark of hope. This time, the call did bring her daughter home, but only in spirit, not in life. Mrs. Williams, the detective's voice was a soft blow. We've located your daughter's car. We found Jennifer and Emily. I am so very sorry. A tempest of emotions raged within Patricia, a tidal wave of grief, certainly, but beneath it, a strange and terrible peace. For 23 years, her mind had been a canvas for horrors, abduction, murder, unimaginable suffering for her daughter and grandchild. Now, the truth was known, a tragic, heartbreaking accident. Yes, but not the monstrous evil she had feared. Jennifer had simply taken a wrong turn on a dark road, on her way to bring a new life into the world. The story broke like a dam. It flooded local news within hours, and in days, it became a national lament. The case that had been a ghost in the heart of Arkansas for 23 years was finally laid to rest. A mystery that had birthed 1,000 theories found its end in one simple, devastating truth. Online forums erupted in a firestorm of disbelief. Legions who had followed the case for years were stunned. After all the speculation, the dark tales of murder, abduction, a secret escape, the truth was so tragically mundane. She had simply vanished into a river, unseen. It felt impossible, yet the evidence was there, an undeniable, heartbreaking final word. For Michael Stark, a man who had lived for over 2 decades under a suffocating cloud of suspicion, it was a moment of vindication. His story, repeated for years, was true. He had been waiting. Apologies trickled in from some, though the skepticism of others lingered, as it always does. But the cold, hard evidence spoke louder than any opinion. This was tragedy, not treachery. Press the like button if this story has taken hold of you. We are nearing the end, but this final chapter is essential. It is the story of the aftermath, of how a family, after a lifetime of waiting, finally brought their lost ones home. In January of 2022, the long-delayed farewell took place. After 23 years of suspended grief, Patricia could finally lay her daughter and granddaughter to rest. The service was a convergence of souls, family, friends, searchers, officers, the very divers who brought them from the deep. Even strangers, their hearts touched by the tragedy, came to bear witness. Jennifer and Emily were laid to rest as one, a fitting union in a single casket, mother and child bound for eternity. The stone above them bore 3 names: Jennifer Williams, Emily Williams, and Baby Williams, for the daughter who never drew a breath in this world, who never received a name. Patricia's eulogy was a testament to love's endurance. Through a veil of tears, she spoke of Jennifer's fire, her fierce devotion to Emily. She spoke of the 23 years spent in limbo, a purgatory of not knowing, of clinging to impossible hope. And finally, she spoke of closure, the painful, precious gift of at last being able to truly say goodbye. My search never ended, Patricia whispered, her voice a fractured echo. I never let go of the belief I would find them. I just wish. Oh, how I wish I had found them sooner. I wish I could have brought them home while they were still. While I still had the chance. The words caught in her throat, consumed by a pain too raw, too real. In that moment, a dam of grief, 23 years in the making, finally burst. The discovery unearthed haunting questions of how the car, their watery tomb, was ever missed. The Illinois River had been scoured back in 1998, but it was a phantom search, not nearly enough. Officials defended their past efforts, explaining that the river searches of 1998 were primitive compared to the modern age. The sonar equipment of that era was a blunt instrument against the sophisticated eyes the dive team used in 2021. The water was a murky shroud, the car was swallowed by a deep abyss, and the brutal truth was, no one thought to look harder in that one forsaken spot. A chilling awareness also fell upon that deadly stretch of Highway 71. The Arkansas Department of Transportation erected brighter lights and more glaring signs, screaming a warning about the treacherous curve. Steel guardrails now stand as sentinels, a final defense against the river's pull. These measures arrived 23 years too late for Jennifer and Emily, a somber promise to spare future souls from the same fate. The dive team, a band of heroes called Adventures with Purpose, was catapulted into the national consciousness. They had solved a riddle that had tormented law enforcement for more than 2 decades. Their video capturing the ghostly discovery went viral, a blazing light on their sacred mission and the countless other families still wandering in the wilderness, searching for their own lost loved ones. As of 2021, thousands of people were still missing in America, many perhaps sharing a similar fate entombed in watery graves yet to be found. Patricia, forged in the fires of her loss, became a fierce advocate, her voice a rallying cry for better funding and resources for the art of water search and recovery. She was determined that other families would receive answers more swiftly than she had. She joined forces with the dive team, championing their work and helping to fund the very operations that ended her own long nightmare. The case became a solemn lesson etched into the very soul of law enforcement. Cold case investigators studied every agonizing detail, dissecting how searches could be perfected, how technology could become a more powerful weapon against the unknown. Jennifer and Emily's tragedy, in its profound sorrow, might now illuminate the path to solving other cases, bringing other families the closure that had finally, mercifully, come to the Williams family. Michael Stark granted a single interview after the discovery, his words a haunting mix of relief and utter devastation. Finally knowing was a strange comfort, but the truth that Jennifer and their daughter had laid in that river all along was a wound torn open anew. He had spent 23 years adrift in a sea of wondering, shadowed by suspicion, trying to piece together a life that could never be whole. Now, he too could finally find his own measure of peace. Emily's biological father, a ghost from her brief life, emerged to voice a regret that would haunt him forever, wishing he had been a better father in the short 22 months she was alive. He stood at the funeral like a spectre in the back, carrying a guilt he would never be able to set down. The story resonated with the soul of America because it touched upon a primal fear, how quickly life can unravel, how a routine drive can spiral into unspeakable tragedy, how a family can be ripped apart in a heartbeat. Jennifer was just trying to get to a hospital to have her baby. She made one wrong turn, or misjudged one curve, and 3 lives were snuffed out in the black, silent depths of the Illinois River. There is a profound truth in this story you must take with you. Life is terrifyingly fragile, and we take it for granted with every breath we take. Jennifer left her mother's house that night, her mind likely a storm of thoughts about her new baby, her turbulent relationship with Michael, weary to her bones, and just wanting to arrive. It never crossed her mind, this is the last night of my life. She was simply living, moving through the world, an unwitting player in a tragic final act. So this is what I need you to feel in your bones. Tell people you love them. Every time you leave your home, every time you get behind the wheel, every time you say goodbye, make it mean something. Because Jennifer kissed her mom goodbye that Thursday night in September of 1998, and that was the final curtain. That was the last time Patricia saw her daughter alive, the last time she held her granddaughter, the last time she felt that baby's kick from within Jennifer's belly. Drive with a sacred caution, especially in the dark, especially on roads unknown. If you're tired, pull over. If your gut screams that something is wrong, listen to it. Jennifer was likely exhausted, 7 months pregnant, driving at night with a toddler. Maybe she should have stopped, rested, and waited for the dawn as her mom had pleaded. But hindsight is a cruel and perfect vision, and we make these gambles every day, utterly blind to the consequences. Remain vigilant of your surroundings. Pay attention to the warnings, the markers, anything that feels amiss. That curve on Highway 71 probably had some kind of sign back in 1998, but maybe it wasn't enough. A mere whisper in the roaring dark. Trust me, if a road feels menacing or unsafe, slow down and be extraordinarily careful. And if someone you love is late, if their promised call never comes, if a cold dread settles in your soul, trust that feeling. Patricia knew something was terribly wrong that Friday morning when the phone remained silent. She was right. Always trust a mother's intuition. Always treat those fears with the gravity they deserve. This isn't about living in fear or being paranoid. It's about being smart, being careful, being present in this fleeting life. Jennifer wasn't doing anything reckless that night. She was just driving, trying to get where she needed to be. But one single moment, one missed curve, and everything changed forever. The family will never escape the shadow of this loss. How could they? Patricia lost her daughter, her granddaughter, and a grandchild she never got to meet. She lost 23 years to the torment of uncertainty, searching, and hoping. Even now, with answers, the pain doesn't vanish. It just changes its shape, becoming a different kind of burden, but no less heavy to carry. But there is a sliver of comfort in the terrible truth. Jennifer and Emily did not suffer for long. They were not the victims of violence or human cruelty. They weren't taken. They weren't murdered. They weren't harmed by evil. They had an accident. A horrific accident, but just an accident. And now they are at rest, together, finally home, after 23 years lost to the dark water. Patricia visits their grave every week. She brings flowers, shares family news, and speaks to them as if they can hear her. And who's to say they can't? She tells Jennifer how much she loved her, how proud she is of the mother Jennifer was to Emily in those fleeting 22 months. She tells Emily about the things she would have done, the woman she would have become. She talks to the baby who was never born about the name she would have carried, Grace. They were going to call her Grace. The case is now officially closed. The investigations have ceased. The searching is over. The wondering has ended. The file that sat open for 23 long years has been stamped solved. But for the family, there is no real closure, not in the way that matters. They have answers, and that is a blessing, but it doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't restore those 23 years of pain and uncertainty. What this story does is remind us that sometimes mysteries are solved, that families who refuse to give up can find answers, that the truth, no matter how long it's buried, can claw its way into the light. Patricia searched for 23 years, and she finally found her daughter and granddaughter. That dedication, that love, that unyielding refusal to surrender it, triumphed in the end. And it reminds us of the incredible, selfless work done by volunteers and organizations devoted to solving cold cases. Adventures with Purpose and groups like them are out there right now, plumbing the depths of rivers and lakes for the vehicles that might hold the answers. They are working to bring closure to families, to solve the mysteries that law enforcement could not. They do this work for free, driven by a profound compassion and a desire to help. That is beautiful. That is humanity at its absolute best. So drop a comment if you believe justice was served, or in this case, if you feel Jennifer and Emily finally found the peace they so richly deserved. Let me know in the comments how this case struck you, how it made you feel, and what lessons you're taking away from it. Before we conclude, I must tell you that some details in this story have been dramatized and names changed to protect the privacy of those involved. But this is based on real events that shook a community to its very foundations. The pain was real, the search was real, the 23 years of waiting were real, and the discovery that finally brought 3 souls home was terrifyingly real. If you or someone you know is enduring the agony of a missing loved one, do not give up hope. Keep searching, keep believing, keep demanding that law enforcement do more. Reach out to the organizations that specialize in cold cases and missing persons. Use social media to cast a light into the darkness. Do whatever you can, because somewhere out there, someone knows something. Somewhere, an answer is waiting to be found. And remember, life is short, people are precious, and every moment is a gift. Hug your family a little tighter tonight. Tell the people you love that you love them. Drive safely. Be careful. Pay attention. Because Jennifer Williams thought she was just taking a drive to have her baby, and she never made it home. Rest in peace, Jennifer. Rest in peace, Emily. Rest in peace, baby Grace. Your family searched for you for 23 years, and now you are finally home where you belong. The river has released you, the mystery is solved, and the love that never stopped searching for you can now begin to heal. Part 2. The aftermath of finding Jennifer and Emily sent shockwaves that resonated through the true crime community and far beyond. This wasn't just another cold case solved. This was the story of 23 years of a family's life, a saga of searching, hoping, and refusing to surrender. The story touched a raw nerve in people, making them contemplate their own families, their own mortality, and the terrifying fragility of everything we take for granted. In the weeks that followed the discovery, Patricia Williams became an accidental public figure. She didn't seek fame, she didn't want attention for herself, but she desperately wanted other families to have hope. She began to do interviews. Her voice carried on podcasts, speaking to anyone who would listen about the sacred duty of never giving up on a missing loved one. For 23 agonizing years, a chorus of voices urged me to let go, Patricia recounted, her own voice a fragile anchor in a storm of sorrow. They insisted I accept that Jennifer and Emily were phantoms of the past, that I would never hold them again, but a mother's heart beats to a different rhythm. I knew my daughter was out there, her spirit calling for me to keep searching. My only regret a wound that will never heal, is that I couldn't reach them in time. The guilt she shouldered was a crushing, invisible weight. Though logic absolved her, her heart was a relentless inquisitor, tormenting her with the ghosts of what if. What if she had demanded Jennifer stay until the morning light? What if she had taken the wheel herself? What if she had screamed louder, rattled the doors of justice until they shattered? Her therapist, a lifeline she finally grasped in the aftermath, spoke of survivors' guilt as a predictable shadow of trauma. But grief is a wild, untamed country, deaf to the sterile language of logic. It was a burden Patricia would likely carry to her final breath. In the months that followed, a wave of memorial events swept through the Arkansas community, their flames flickering not just for Jennifer and Emily, but for every soul lost in the twilight, for every family still suspended in the agonizing purgatory Patricia had endured for over 2 decades. A moment of breathtaking power unfolded at a candlelight vigil held on the sacred ground of what should have been Emily's 25th birthday in November of 2022. Hundreds of souls converged, a sea of strangers drawn together by the gravity of the story, weaving a tapestry of shared sorrow and a fragile hope for healing. A young woman named Ashley's voice cut through the silence, trembling but true. A decade ago, my own sister was swallowed by the unknown, she confessed, her words cracking. We still haven't found her. But Patricia's journey is a beacon in my darkness. It whispers that even after decades turn to dust, answers can claw their way to the surface. That somewhere, my sister is waiting to be brought home. This is the haunting legacy of a story like Jennifer's. It sends shockwaves through the heart of humanity, touching shores you never knew existed. In Patricia's reflection, every family with an empty chair saw their own anguished face, forging an unlikely fellowship of the brokenhearted who found strength in the shared landscape of their pain. Share this chronicle with those who feel the pull of a true mystery. These are not just stories. They are testaments that must be spoken aloud, not for the thrill of the dark, but to honor the beating hearts behind the headlines and the families whose search never ends. The investigation into how the car remained a sunken secret for so long unearthed disquieting truths about the search protocols of a bygone era. The Arkansas State Police launched an internal review, a solemn post-mortem on the actions taken in 1998 and the ghosts of what might have been. The resulting report was a stark, unflinching confession of past failures. The original search had been a creature of logic, its gaze fixed upon the most direct path, the artery of Highway 7. But fate, or a simple choice, had led Jennifer down a different road. She had ended up on Highway 71, a path that intersected her destiny, but was not the one they had foreseen. The very stretch of river that held her secret had been probed before, but with the primitive tools of 1998. Divers had pierced the murky depths in scattered locations, a piecemeal effort against an overwhelming unknown. The sonar of the day was a blunt instrument, its electronic eyes easily blinded, and in hindsight's cruel light, they knew they should have searched deeper. The report concluded with a litany of crucial recommendations: enhanced funding for search and rescue, investment in the clairvoyant eyes of modern sonar, and ironclad protocols for aquatic searches. Some of these changes were embraced, others remain ghosts on paper, awaiting the breath of funding and political will to give them life. But from this profound tragedy, a strange and powerful ripple effect was born. The unearthing of Jennifer's car became a key, unlocking other cold, silent tombs. The spotlight on adventures with purpose illuminated the hope they offered, drawing other heartbroken families out of the shadows. In 2022 alone, the dive team resurrected 3 more vehicles from watery graves, solving cold cases that had slumbered for 5 to 15 years. Each discovery was a final, painful answer for another family, and Jennifer and Emily's tragedy became an unlikely catalyst for healing, a bittersweet comfort for Patricia. One of those resurrected stories struck particularly close to home. A 19-year-old student, David Martinez, had vanished in Arkansas back in 2014. His car was discovered in a lake just 50 miles from Jennifer's final resting place. David's mother, Rosa, found her way to Patricia, and the 2 women forged a sacred bond in their shared experience. "We've joined a club no one ever asks to be a part of," Rosa murmured, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup in Patricia's living room in early 2023. "But I am so grateful to Patricia for showing me it was possible. Her story was the only thing that kept me from surrendering to despair." Together, these 2 women ignited a new beacon of hope, a support group for the families of the missing in Arkansas. It became a sanctuary where stories, pain, and fragile hopes could be shared, a place for those still searching and for those, like Patricia and Rosa, navigating the treacherous aftermath of discovery. For Patricia, the group was a startlingly profound therapy. For 23 years, her identity had been forged in loss and the relentless quest for answers. Now, she could be the woman who had walked through the fire and emerged, ready to guide others through that same consuming darkness, finding a purpose that bloomed from the ashes of her pain. Let me know in the depths below if you've heard whispers of stories like this. The comment section is a sacred space where similar tragedies are shared, a testament to how tragically common these silent vanishings truly are. The dive team that brought Jennifer and Emily home became reluctant stars in the true crime cosmos, their YouTube channel exploding with millions of viewers. Yet, they navigated this newfound fame with a solemn grace, always insisting their mission was not about glory, it was about bringing the lost back to those who loved them. In a mid-2022 interview, the lead diver, Jake Thompson, spoke of the immense emotional toll of their work. "Every time we find a vehicle, we find someone's everything," he said. "We feel the victory of solving a puzzle, but we never forget that a family is about to receive the most devastating news of their lives." Jennifer Williams was a daughter, a mother. Finding her meant ending the not knowing, but it also meant confirming their deepest fears. The team forged a sacred protocol for handling these discoveries with reverence. Upon finding remains, they would summon law enforcement and retreat, allowing the professionals to take command. They documented their journey, but shielded the public from the rawest details, always honoring the sanctity of the family's grief. They began to share their craft, training other dive teams in their revolutionary techniques, spreading their knowledge like seeds of hope. By 2024, dozens of volunteer dive teams across America were following their lead, all inspired by the profound success of bringing Jennifer, and so many others, home. Technology, too, marched relentlessly onward. By 2023, the once esoteric power of sonar became accessible to even the smallest police departments. Underwater drones with high-definition eyes became standard, while artificial intelligence began to sift through the murky data, identifying sunken ghosts with an accuracy that was once pure science fiction. Had these miraculous tools existed in 1998, Jennifer's watery grave would have been discovered in days, perhaps mere hours. But that is the brutal paradox of progress. Its answers often arrive long after the questions have faded into silent screams. Michael Stark, in the meantime, attempted the impossible, to rebuild a life shattered by exoneration. The weight of 23 years of suspicion had carved deep lines into his soul. His son David, now a man in his 40s, had grown up in the long, cold shadow of that stigma, where whispers and speculation assumed the darkest of truths. "I never doubted my father's innocence for a second," David confessed in a rare 2023 interview. But there's a vast, cruel ocean between knowing the truth and convincing the world to believe it. Friendships withered. Opportunities vanished. Even after they proved it was a tragic accident, some eyes still held a flicker of doubt. This is the insidious nature of being tethered to a mystery. Even when innocence is proven beyond all doubt, the stain of suspicion is a ghost that never truly fades. Michael and David eventually sought anonymity in new cities, hoping to finally outrun the echoes of their past. Michael never took another wife, never fathered another child. He confessed that the phantom guilt for Jennifer and their unborn daughter, a tragedy not of his making, was a burden too heavy to share. He managed to build a life, but a permanent shadow fell across his world, a profound sense of loss that tinted every moment of his existence. Let your voice be heard in the comments below. Do you believe justice, in its own slow way, was served here, or should more have been done back in 1998? I want to know your thoughts on the labyrinth of this investigation and its final, heartbreaking resolution. The anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, September 11th, was forever transfigured after 2021. What was once a day of agonizing hope and whispered prayers became a day of bittersweet requiem. Patricia still held vigil, but the memorials were now transformed. No longer were they searching, but celebrating the lives of Jennifer and Emily, weaving their memory into a tapestry of support for other families still lost in the wilderness of waiting. The memorial in 2022 was a storm of emotion. It was the first where Patricia knew her daughter and granddaughter's resting place, the first she could visit their grave, an anchor for her grief in the physical world. Hundreds of souls gathered a congregation of the dive team, the officers who had chased shadows for years, and the haunted faces of families still searching the horizon. Patricia delivered a eulogy that day that shattered every heart in attendance. For 23 years, I wondered where my babies were, she confessed. A lone figure at the podium, a portrait of Jennifer and Emily glowing behind her like an apparition. I painted every horrific scenario in my mind. I lived 1,000 nightmares. And the truth, when it finally clawed its way into the light, was somehow more merciful and more monstrous than anything I could ever have conceived. She paused, gathering the fragments of her composure. More merciful because it was a tragic accident. Jennifer wasn't stolen, she wasn't brutalized. She made a single wrong turn in the velvet dark, and the river's embrace was swift. There is a terrible grace in that, but more monstrous, because they were so achingly close, all that time. Monstrous because if we had only searched deeper, if the technology had been born sooner, if our eyes had been sharper, we might have brought them home years ago. I might have laid my daughter to rest before I turned 60. Emily might have had a funeral attended by friends who still remembered the sound of her laughter. A profound hush fell over the crowd, a silence punctuated only by the soft percussion of weeping. Every person there understood the brutal calculus of her grief, the relief warring with regret, the answers that only sharpened the sting of the questions. But I need to tell you something vital, Patricia declared, her voice a rising flame. You cannot surrender. If you have someone missing, if you are lost in the search, if all you have is hope, you must keep going. It took me 23 years, but I found my daughter. Your answer is out there, waiting in the shadows. It may not be the one you pray for, but closure is a balm that endless wondering can never offer. You must trust me on that. After the speech, a procession of the haunted approached Patricia, each unburdening their own story. A man whose brother had vanished into thin air in 2010, a woman whose teenage daughter had dissolved from their lives in 2015, a couple whose son had driven into the sunset one day and never returned. Every story a unique wound, but the agony was universal, that soul-crushing void of not knowing, a suspended reality where you cannot truly mourn because a flicker of hope insists. Asterisk, maybe, just maybe, they're still out there. Asterisk. Patricia absorbed every story, offering what solace she could, a lifeline of contact information for support groups and dive teams. She had become an unwilling high priestess for the families of the lost, a role she never sought but embraced with a fierce empathy. For who could possibly understand their torment better? The media continued to resurrect Jennifer's story, a ghost that walked on anniversaries and with every new revelation. In 2023, the unforgiving stretch of Highway 71, where Jennifer's car had plunged into the river, was officially christened the Jennifer and Emily Williams Memorial Highway. The new designation was accompanied by armor against the darkness, brighter lighting, starker signage, and guardrails that stood like sentinels. It will never bring them back, Patricia conceded at the dedication ceremony, but perhaps it can save someone else. Perhaps another mother will be spared this road, this loss. That would be a legacy worth having. The ceremony was a somber gathering of state officials, the local community, and emissaries from road safety organizations. It was a small gesture against an immense tragedy, but symbols are potent magic. That ribbon of asphalt would forever bear Jennifer and Emily's names, a chilling reminder of the price of flawed infrastructure and the sacred importance of vigilance. Strike that like button if you believe these memorials are etched with profound importance. And tell me in the comments, do you feel renaming highways and raising barricades truly saves lives, or is it a symbolic gesture to appease our collective grief? The case sent shockwaves through Arkansas's approach to missing persons cases. The state legislature moved to action, unleashed new funding for search and rescue operations, specifically arming them for aquatic warfare. They forged alliances with volunteer dive teams, codifying protocols for when and how these underwater hunters should be deployed. They also engineered a new, intelligent database for the missing, one that weighed geographic and environmental variables. Now, if someone vanished between 2 points, the system would immediately flag every treacherous body of water along the way, demanding a thorough, merciless search. It was a fundamental strategy that should have existed for decades, but it had arrived at last. New training regimens were born for law enforcement, schooling them in the dark arts of water searches, sonar sorcery, and the delicate dance of collaborating with volunteer legions. By 2024, Arkansas had tragically become a model for other states, a blueprint for how to confront the abyss. But all of this progress arrived too late for Jennifer and Emily. That is the devastating paradox of advancement. It is a monument built on the bones of those who needed it first. In 2023, a documentary crew approached Patricia, wanting to chisel Jennifer's epic story into film. They envisioned a sweeping chronicle of the disappearance, the 23-year odyssey of searching, the stunning discovery, and the emotional fallout. Patricia recoiled at first. The story had been bled dry, and she was weary of the pilgrimage back to her darkest days. But the filmmakers painted a vision of a documentary that could be a beacon for other families, a lightning rod to draw attention to the legions of the missing, a catalyst that could solve other cold, silent cases. Patricia consented, but on her own sacred terms. The film had to celebrate Jennifer and Emily as vibrant souls, not just as silent victims. It had to be a weapon for others, armed with information on how to search, what resources existed, and how the world could help. The documentary, unleashed in late 2023, was a force of nature. It wove together ghostly home videos of Jennifer and Emily, raw interviews with the family, haunting footage from the decades of searching, and the breathtaking, real-time video of the vehicle's discovery in the murky depths. It laid bare Patricia's titanic struggle, the toll it exacted, and the devastating, beautiful moment when the answers finally broke the surface. The most soul-shattering sequence was near the end, showing Patricia at the graveside. She brought flowers, a weekly ritual, and spoke to Jennifer and Emily as if they were standing right beside her. She told Jennifer of her other grandchildren, the children Emily's biological father now had, children who would have called Emily Aunt. She spoke of the changing seasons, of family whispers, of the crushing, hollow weight of their absence. "I found you," Patricia whispered to the cold stone, tears carving paths down her face. "I never gave up, and I found you. You're home now, my baby. You and Emily and Grace, you are all home where you belong." The documentary went supernova, capturing millions of viewers across a universe of platforms. It collected awards like Fallen Stars at film festivals and was seized by a major streaming giant. But its true triumph was measured in resurrected hope. It sparked new leads in other cold cases, dragged the names of forgotten souls back into the light, and inspired a new wave of volunteers to join the hunt. One breathtaking outcome, a family in Oregon, watching the film, was struck by a chilling premonition about their own missing brother. They contacted a local dive team, pointing them to a river near his last known location. Within a week, they found his vehicle. He had been gone for 8 years, and just like Jennifer, it seemed he had simply veered off the road into the water. The documentary had reached through the screen and delivered closure. That is the ferocious power of telling these stories, of refusing to let the missing fade into the fog of statistics. Jennifer and Emily's tragedy became a catalyst, a key that unlocked other tombs, that brought peace to other shattered families, and that forged real change in the very architecture of investigation. Comment with the state you're watching from at this very moment. It helps me chart the journey of this story and understand what local mysteries you might want to see brought into the light next. By 2024, the Williams family had discovered a fragile piece. Not happiness one never recovers from an amputation of the soul, but a quiet acceptance had settled, the ability to summon a memory without being completely undone by it. Patricia's other children, Jennifer's siblings, had each navigated the labyrinth of loss in their own way. Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah, was just 18 when the world swallowed her sister whole. She had lived her entire adult life under the shadow of that absence. Now, in her 40s, Sarah spoke of how the discovery had fractured and remade her. For 23 years, Jennifer was preserved in amber, Sarah recounted. In my mind, she was forever 22, forever radiant with pregnancy, forever on the cusp of motherhood. I got older, I had my own children, I lived, but Jennifer remained 22. When they found her, I was forced to confront the reality that she was gone for all of it, that while I was graduating, marrying, giving birth, my sister was resting at the bottom of a river. It's a bizarre and cruel species of grief to metabolize. Sarah's daughter, now 15, bore the name Jennifer in honor of her aunt. Young Jennifer, or JJ, as they called her, had never met her namesake, but she grew up in a house filled with her stories. After the discovery, JJ became a keeper of the flame, obsessively absorbing every detail of the case, watching the documentary multiple times. I feel her with me. JJ revealed in a follow-up interview. It's like, I carry her name, so I have to carry her memory. I need people to remember she was a person, vibrant and real, not just another true crime story. She was my aunt. She was my grandmother's daughter. She was someone who mattered. It's the sacred truth that so often dissolves in the telling of true crime, the vibrant humanity of the souls at the center. They are rendered into case files, into enigmas begging to be solved, into narratives spun for an audience. But Jennifer Williams was a universe unto herself, a woman who adored her daughter, who dreamt of the child she carried, who surely had secret fears and favorite songs and jokes that only she understood. And Emily, a toddler whose world was just beginning to bloom with words, who clutched a favorite toy, who was the source of her mother's laughter. They were not a story, they were life, and it is as life that they must be remembered. In their name, the family forged a legacy of hope, a scholarship at the very community college where Jennifer had chased her own dreams. It is a lifeline for single mothers who dare to build a future while raising their children. A quiet, beautiful act that keeps Jennifer's spirit burning brightly, offering other women the light of opportunity that was so tragically extinguished for her. They also poured their grief into purpose, funding organizations that hunt for the lost, specifically empowering water searches with new equipment and training. The Williams Family Fund, a name whispered with reverence, has armed several small police departments with sonar they could only dream of, and every single piece of that equipment bears a small, solemn plaque. In memory of Jennifer and Emily Williams, never stop searching. A vow etched in steel. Patricia's health, ravaged by years of relentless searching and crushing stress, found a fragile dawn after the discovery. The abyss of not knowing had been consuming her from the inside out, a slow poison manifesting as heart ailments, soaring blood pressure, a body at war with itself. But once she had the answer, once she could stand before a grave instead of a silent telephone, her body finally began to mend. She would never be whole again. The scars left by 23 years of ceaseless grief and terror do not simply vanish. Yet, sleep came more readily, nourishment returned, and the fog of despair began to lift. She could finally be present, truly present, for her other children and grandchildren, her heart no longer held captive by the ghost of the unknown. I have my daughter back, Patricia's voice echoed in a 2024 interview. Not in the way a mother ever wants, but she is with me. I know where she rests. I can visit her. I can speak to her. For 23 agonizing years, I was denied that. So in the strangest of ways, through the deepest nightmare of my life, I have found a kind of peace I thought was lost to me forever. Share with me in the comments if you've ever walked through a similar fire of loss, how you found your footing, what balms soothed your soul. The sanctuary we've built in these comment sections is extraordinary, a place where people share wisdom that truly heals. The true crime world's reaction to Jennifer's case was a maelstrom, a fascinating and terrifying spectacle. In the wake of the discovery, a tidal wave of content crashed upon the internet: videos, podcasts, articles, and endless social media threads. Everyone clamored to stake their claim on the story, to dissect the tragedy, to spin their own theories from the threads of her fate. Some of it was crafted with reverence, treating Jennifer and Emily as the sacred souls they were while bearing witness to their story. But so much of it was a grotesque feeding frenzy, vultures using their final moments for clicks and views, utterly devoid of compassion for the family left in the wreckage. This is the shadow side of our fascination, where the line between bearing witness and pure exploitation evaporates into a toxic mist. Patricia has been a warrior on this front. I don't mind when they tell Jennifer's story, she has declared, time and again. But when they twist it into a spectacle, when they fixate on the most horrific details, when they forget that these were breathing, loving people with a family still drowning in grief, that is when they desecrate her memory. My daughter is not your entertainment. She was my world. She has bravely called out creators who danced on that line, and to their credit, some have shown remorse, retracting or revising their work, but others have dug in their heels, cloaking themselves in the argument of public information, claiming a right to tell the story however they see fit, a right that may be technically true, but morally bankrupt. The ethical labyrinth of true crime is fraught with peril. Where is the boundary between raising a flag of awareness and raising a banner of exploitation? How do you weave a narrative that honors the dead while captivating the living? How do you balance the public's thirst for a story with a family's desperate need for privacy and peace? There are no simple maps for this territory, but perhaps the one true compass is this. Remember the humanity. Remember that behind every headline is a shattered family, that every case number was once a name whispered with love. Tell the story, yes, but tell it with grace, with reverence, with the chilling understanding that your primetime thriller is someone else's waking nightmare. And yet, the online world forged in Jennifer's name has been a beacon. On Reddit threads, in Facebook groups, and across forums dedicated to her case, a new community has risen, a place where people share intelligence on similar cases, strategize on preventing such tragedies, and offer a shoulder to families still lost in the wilderness of searching. One Facebook group, Justice for Jennifer and Emily, has swelled to over 50,000 souls. It has transformed into a sanctuary where people unburden their hearts about their own missing loved ones, a resource hub for families in crisis, and a command center where volunteers organize to search for the lost. And at its heart is Patricia, an admin who tirelessly answers the cries for help that echo her own past. "I can't save them all," Patricia confessed, her voice thick with purpose. "I can't solve every case or bring every child home, but if my story can help just one family find their missing soul, if I can offer a sliver of comfort to one person walking the hellish road I walked, then all of this unbearable pain will have meant something." What a breathtaking alchemy to take the leaden weight of tragedy and spin it into the gold of purpose. It is a feat of the human spirit not all can achieve, and none should ever have to. But for Patricia, it has been the very air she breathes, the will to endure, the way to carve meaning from a senseless void. Hit that subscribe button if you are drawn to the stories of families who refuse to surrender, of impossible cases cracked open by sheer will, of the beating hearts behind the cold, hard headlines. That is the soul of this channel, the real stories, told with the respect they command. Pulling back the lens, Jennifer's case threw a harsh, unforgiving light on the fractures in how America seeks its lost. Thousands upon thousands are missing at this very moment. Many, perhaps, resting in watery graves, entombed in vehicles in lakes and rivers that have never been properly searched. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NamUs, bore a chilling ledger of over 100,000 active missing persons cases as of 2024. Some, of course, are ghosts by choice, seeking a new life and the right to be left alone. But countless others are like Jennifer, victims of a cruel twist of fate or a darker human hand, their families left suspended in a purgatory of unanswered questions. The resources we dedicate to finding them are tragically, shamefully insufficient. Police departments are stretched to the breaking point, drowning in the deluge of immediate, violent crime. Cold cases are relegated to dusty shelves, their urgency fading against the constant scream of new emergencies. Families are so often cast adrift, forced to become their own detectives, with no map, no tools, and no training. And into that void step the heroes. Volunteer organizations, groups like Adventures with Purpose, and hundreds of others become the cavalry. They fill the chasm left by official resources, donating their time, their sophisticated equipment, and their hard-won expertise, all fueled by the unwavering belief that every soul deserves to be found, and every family deserves the peace of an answer. But these noble missions run on the currency of donations and goodwill. They are in constant need of funding, of better equipment, of training, of support. Jennifer's story shined a brilliant spotlight on their work, and donations surged. But the need is eternal, and the public's gaze is tragically fleeting. If you feel a fire in your heart to make a tangible difference, consider giving to these organizations or volunteering your skills. Even the smallest of donations can help buy the gear that pierces the dark water, that funds the search, that finally delivers closure. It is one of the most powerful ways to turn helplessness into hope. By 2024, the narrative surrounding Jennifer's case began to transform. The raw shock and the initial tidal wave of grief had receded. The story had been told, its echoes reverberating across the world. Now, the conversation turned to legacy, to the profound and lasting change her story had carved into the world. The safety enhancements on Highway 71 were not just steel and paint, they were silent saviors. This was a confirmed fact. Countless accidents had been averted by the new barriers and stark warnings. Drivers, who might have followed Jennifer's path into the darkness, were now alerted in time, their descent slowed, the deadly curve navigated with newfound caution. The infusion of funding for water search teams was cracking open cold cases, one by one. By the middle of 2024, more than a dozen vehicles had been pulled from the murky depths of Arkansas waters, each one a time capsule of tragedy, each discovery a final, merciful answer for a family that had all but given up hope. The scholarship fund was a garden of opportunity, blossoming in Jennifer's name. Women in circumstances, hauntingly similar to her own, young, determined, fighting to build a life, while raising their children, were being given a chance to soar, a chance Jennifer never had. The volunteer dive teams were a more formidable force than ever before. Galvanized by Jennifer's story, new volunteers had flocked to their ranks, new funding had poured in, and their techniques had been honed to a razor's edge. They were finding the lost at a rate that was once unimaginable. The documentary of her journey had become a sacred text in criminal justice programs, a lesson in how to investigate the cases of the missing. Police academies screened it for new cadets, a powerful parable of what can go wrong and a roadmap for how to do better. Forensic programs used it as a masterclass in the grim, delicate art of water recovery. Patricia's crusade was now bending the will of the nation, shaping policy from state houses to the federal level. She had stood before legislative committees, her testimony a haunting symphony of loss and resolve, consulting on the very architecture of laws for the missing. Her voice, forged in the crucible of 23 years of searching, was an instrument of undeniable power. All of this, born from a single, shattering moment on a desolate highway in September of 1998. All of this, from the soul of a mother who stared into the abyss and refused to blink, who hunted for 23 years, and who alchemized her unending grief into a force for change. This, then, is the true legacy of Jennifer and Emily. Not a dusty file stamped, solved. Not just another heart-wrenching tale, but a living, breathing transformation that now shields and saves others. This is the sacred power unleashed when we dare to tell these stories with reverence, when we honor the fallen by learning from their final moments, when we weave purpose from the threads of tragedy. Every year, the anniversary returns, a day that has morphed from a memorial of sorrow into a vibrant celebration, a festival for the lives Jennifer and Emily lived, however fleeting, a celebration of the seismic shifts their story triggered, a celebration for the other families who, guided by the light of their case, finally found their own way out of the darkness. At the 2024 memorial, held on the hallowed date of September 11th, 26 years, after they vanished into the night, Patricia stood enveloped by a sea of faces, each a testament to her journey. Families who had embraced their own lost loved ones, thanks to the revolutionary search methods her fight had pioneered. Women whose futures were built upon scholarships bearing her daughter's name. Officers of the law, their training manuals rewritten with the hard-learned lessons from this very case. My daughter and my granddaughter are gone, Patricia's voice resonated, a quiet thunder across the solemn gathering. No miracle can reverse that. No passage of time can make it right. But look around you. Witness the staggering good that has risen from the ashes of this horror. See the families who now have answers, the lives that have been spared, the world that has been altered. Jennifer and Emily did not die in vain. Their story has a pulse, a purpose, a profound impact. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd through a shimmer of tears, each one a perfect blend of anguish and pride. That is what I demand they be remembered for, not for the brutal mechanics of an accident, but for their memory, an eternal flame that burns in every cold case thawed, every safety barrier erected, every family granted the solace of closure. That is their immortal legacy. That is how they changed the world. A profound silence held the crowd captive, a breath held in unison. Then, a single clap cut through the stillness. It was answered by another, then a dozen more, until a wave of applause crashed over the gathering. They were applauding not the tragedy, but the transfiguration, not the unbearable loss, but the unbreakable legacy. And this is where the story must find its final shore, not in the cold embrace of death, but in the fierce persistence of life, not in the haunting echoes of questions, but in the solace of answers, not in the shadow of despair, but in the defiant light of hope. Jennifer Williams, her daughter Emily, and her unborn child Grace perished on a dark highway in September 1998, but their story did not end in that cold, silent river. It is still being written, in the triumphant closing of every new case, in the peace that settles upon every family that finds its way home. So let this be the lesson you carry from this day. Life is a fragile, breathtaking gift. Proclaim your love to those you cherish. Command your vessel with care. Be awake to the world around you. Trust the primal hum of your instincts. And should the shadows ever claim someone you know, become a relentless storm of love, never cease the search. Never surrender hope. Never give up. For somewhere in the vast, silent expanse, answers lie in wait. Patricia found her daughter after 23 years of winters. It demanded technology that was science fiction when Jennifer first vanished. It demanded an army of volunteers who bled their time and talent. It demanded a community that refused to forget. It demanded a mother's love that knew no surrender. But against all of creation, she found her daughter. If you are the one who searches, let this story be your compass. Let it be your inspiration. Let it be the irrefutable proof that even when decades bleed into dust, even when the chorus of the world begs you to give up, even when it all seems impossible, a chance still breathes, hope still lives. The sacred possibility of bringing them home is never truly gone. And even if your own heart has been spared this specific anguish, you are not a bystander in this human drama. You can still be a hero. Fuel the engines of the search organizations. Offer your skills to the cause. Be a signal fire on social media for those who are lost. Be the vigilant eyes on the road, the guardian in the crowd. You cannot know when one small act of awareness might shatter a case wide open and deliver a family from its torment. This is the true and terrible saga of Jennifer and Emily Williams, who were stolen by the night on September 11th, 1998, and were returned by the water on December 4th, 2021. 23 years of an unrelenting search. 23 years of impossible hope. 23 years of a mother's love that would not be denied. And finally, after a lifetime of waiting, they came home. While some details have been artfully shaded and names altered to shield the living, the core of this odyssey is an unshakable truth. This happened. This family was shattered. This mother searched for 23 agonizing years. And then, in a moment, both merciful and heartbreaking, she found her daughter. Rest in the deepest peace, Jennifer Williams. Rest in the gentlest peace, Emily Williams. Rest in innocent peace, baby Grace. Your story has been told, your memory has been consecrated, and your legacy is now immortal. The river has surrendered its secrets. The mystery is no more, and now you may finally rest in the serenity you were so long denied. To every soul watching, listening, and feeling this, embrace your loved ones with the fierce urgency of now. Travel safely, stay vigilant, and never, ever abandon hope. Because miracles still tear through the fabric of the ordinary, mysteries are destined to be solved. And love, a mother's love, a family's love, is an eternal force. It will search for 23 years if it must, and it will eventually bring everyone home. That is the story. That is the truth. That is what became of Jennifer and Emily Williams. May they rest in eternal grace, and may their story echo onward, a beacon for all the years to come.